member for Riga.
There are two components to the amendment that I've circulated. It's a simple amendment to the way the drafting of the objects of the social service of the bill. But what's important in the first part of this amendment is it's consistent with the recommendation 16A of the Respect at Work report. And this amendment omits the "so far as practicable" from the objects. And this is necessary because the current wording introduces a lower standard than is proposed in the recommendation 16 of the Respect at Work report. It's inconsistent with the several other objects contained in Section 3 of the Sex Discrimination Act, which set a higher standard, and it may give rise to the implication that rights codified in the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women will only be protected domestically to the extent that it is practicable to do so. In relation to the second part of the amendment, it is about changing the language used. The objects as drafted by the government in the bill refers to men and women specifically. We need to start moving to gender-neutral language. Legislation in this place needs to start embracing the future and younger generations who are not defined by gender language. In line with the Commonwealth Latimer House principles, gender-neutral language should be used in the drafting and use of legislation. And I've heard the Attorney-General say in this place this is changes for later and we're just going to stick to exactly the wording of the Respect at Work report. But the reality is it is incumbent on all of us in this place to think about the population that we are going to bind by this legislation. We need to make sure people identify, see themselves in this legislation. And by restraining the wording, even just in the objects of the Act, you are saying that you are limiting it to just those two categorisations. And the reality in this day and age, in 2022, that does not represent everyone. Many people in our communities do not identify in that way. And so by limiting the language that way, you are limiting the effect of this legislation, which is good. It is very good that we're implementing Respect at Work, that we're making sure sexual harassment and discrimination is limited. But gender-neutral language is a way of showing, especially to young people, that everyone in this place is future-focused, recognises that times are changing, and it is important that legislation does so as well. It should reflect and respond to community expectations. We know that gender-neutral language is important, and there's a strong case for it. The Australian Human Rights Commission National Survey found that several harms that the Respect at Work report are seeking to address are incredibly acute for people who identify as LGBTQIA+. In fact, some 1 in 4 out of 7,000 interviewed reported harassment in their workplace. So the goal of this legislation is to limit this. Then the language in the legislation should be inclusive, not exclusive. And that is what this amendment simply seeks to do. And this is aligned with the recommendations and the submission of the Law Council of Australia. I should say, it's consistent with the conclusion of the final report of the inquiry into this bill. The report on the inquiry into this bill concluded that, with respect to the Objects Clause, the committee notes that there are different and strongly held views that the construction of paragraph 3E of the Sex Discrimination Act. The committee acknowledges the importance of gender-inclusive language throughout Australia's anti-discrimination law and urges the Australian government to give more thought to the matter. So I would urge the Attorney-General and the government to consider changing the language of the objects and consider this amendment. It is a simple amendment. This is not opening up a floodgate or changing anything drastic from where the Respect at Work recommendations go. But it is a strong signal to young people, to people of LGBTQI or people that are non-binary, that don't identify with man or woman, that they are also meant to be protected and included in this legislation.